On certain days, it appears like the paddock is the place to be for gossip, and the race weekend in Australia provided the drivers with the perfect outlet. Several drivers and teams have quietly or not so quietly accused Red Bull of sandbagging and possibly even cheating. And this time, George Russell is the driving force. George Russell says Red Bull is holding back its Formula One car and is almost embarrassed to unleash its full potential as Max Verstappen extends his team's 100% winning run in 2023. Despite a disastrous first lap that saw him fall behind the two Mercedes cars of Russell and Lewis Hamilton, Verstappen won the Australian Grand Prix. Russell led early on but was forced out of contention when he pitted during a safety car period that turned into an untimely red flag, putting Hamilton ahead of Verstappen at the restart. Nonetheless, Verstappen came sailing by with ease, as Hamilton put it, the latest display of straight-line speed advantage. Mercedes chief Toto Wolff described as mind-boggling and exhibited a terrifying change of pace to transform a 0.5-second deficit one lap into a 2.1-second lead the next. For sure they're holding back, Russell told BBC Radio 5 Live. They're almost embarrassed to show their full potential because the faster they seem globally, the more the sport is going to try to hold them back somehow. Realistically, they probably have 7/10 advantage over the rest of the field. I don't know what the pace difference looks like at the moment, but Max has got no reason to be pushing, and nor has Red Bull. They have done a really great job, we can't take that away, and we clearly have to up our game. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner was keen to point out that Verstappen's early lead was worsened by a Hamilton mistake. However, like with the previous two races, it was clear that the RB19 had a substantially greater advantage in the race than in qualifying. In Melbourne, where Verstappen had just qualified on pole by a few tenths of a second, there were multiple indications of this. His relatively conservative first lap, for example, was motivated in part by the realization that dropping 1 or 2 spots was not the end of the world because I knew we had a quick car. As Verstappen stated after the race, Verstappen had a good notion of how much speed he had in store following Hamilton's move. They were 0.5 seconds and 0.75 seconds fast, respectively, and suddenly his opponent was at arm's length, and Verstappen was in cruise control. Despite this, he raced ahead by approximately 0.4 of a second each lap during a mid-race virtual safety car break, going 11 seconds clear of the fight for second. A margin that was only trimmed down by a mistake while braking at the last corner, which sent the Red Bull temporarily off track. Could this be an indication of sandbagging? Is the Red Bull just good in clean air? Verstappen, on the other hand, had no intention of pushing on the hard tire. He only wanted to finish owing to the uncertainty produced by rain-stymied extended runs on Friday. That reminded me of Bahrain, when it was discovered that the Red Bulls had dramatically sped up despite reliability worries. The goal was simply to generate a good buffer, nothing more. But because Australia felt the same way, some individuals were eager to point out that Red Bull might be holding back. Horner, on the other hand, was fed up with Russell's sandbagging proposals. That's very generous of him, Horner countered. He'd know too well from his team about those kinds of advantages. There's always an element of management that goes on in any race. Because it was a one-stop race and a very early one-stop race, of course there was an element of tire management going on. Red Bull's car is clearly designed for racing rather than qualifying. This could be one of several factors contributing to the advantage witnessed on Sundays, including as energy deployment, tire usage, rivals battling in dirty air, and possibly even the Red Bulls holding back on occasion. Sergio Perez's attempts to push his way through the field following a qualifying incident and a pit lane start, according to Horner, demonstrated that the RB19 did not have the edge indicated. Chico wasn't hanging about and he wasn't holding back 7/10 a lap just because he didn't want to show it, said Horner. Perez was clearly restricted by the circumstances of starting so far back on a circuit that is impossible to overtake on, even with an advantage like Red Bull's, and that compresses the field since it is a short lap with few true turns. Even in clear air, Perez appeared to take longer than expected to make progress, requiring 19 laps mid-race to narrow the gap on Lando Norris and pass the McLaren. However, Perez was plainly uneasy in the RB19 throughout the weekend, and it appears that his performance was far below what the vehicle was capable of. Even on a terrible weekend, he was able to capitalize and finish 5th, aided by the pandemonium on the track. Perez would have finished a few spots lower if not for this. So, Russell's statements appeared to be a tiny request to the FIA to investigate the RB19. After all, if it is that quick and something is going on, it should be punished. As is customary, back to Russell's point, it wouldn't be the first time in F1 history that a team was hesitant to announce how far ahead it was. And this is exactly what Max Verstappen has said to put an end to the rumors. Just like Mercedes admitted to doing so in 2014, fearing a major overreaction to its performance at the outset of new standards and some necessary modifications as a consequence. It was hardly an irrational reaction, especially knowing that it is not uncommon for F1 stakeholders to change the rules in order to break domination. As a result, it's not surprised that Red Bull is being careful. However, it is unlikely that Red Bull is embarrassed to show the entirety of its performance. that simply hasn't come in helpful too much. As a result, George Russell feels Red Bull has yet to realize its full potential. Russell claims on the BBC's Checkered Flag podcast that Max Verstappen and Red Bull can still demonstrate more speed, but are holding back to avoid the FIA calling them back. According to Russell, the race result and ease with which Verstappen passed Hamilton indicate that there is much more in the Red Bull than Verstappen has shown thus far. It's safe to assume that Red Bull racing is lightning fast. While other drivers strive to compete with Max Verstappen, they quickly discover that it is nearly impossible. This, of course, has produced uproar on the grid. So much so that Verstappen feels compelled to share the truth. The speculation, according to championship leader Verstappen, is nonsense. The BBC questioned the Dutchman, wondering if they were actually holding back. Verstappen then said, "We are just doing our best with the development of the car. Apart from that, it's also about controlling the pace. Nobody knew how long the hard tire would last." Verstappen stated that it was nothing out of the ordinary. Red Bull is simply faster, and because there were few long circuits during practice, there was continual concern about keeping tire wear under control. "There is no need to gain half a second every lap and destroy your tires," he said. But what is the key to Red Bull's speed? As we explained in a recent video, the most of it is related to the car's rear end. However, at the Australian Grand Prix, they brought a revised front wing to improve their overall package. The crew arrived in Australia with a modified front wing structure, including a new flap arrangement and alterations to the in-plate and dive-plane regions. This was done to help balance the car with the various rear wing configurations. The in-plate's top and middle sections are now more cambered, exposing more of the dive-plane to the incoming flow. This undoubtedly improves the outwash effect, which is still another reason why it must work on a trade-off that sees it load the inner section of the wing, or at least more than it has with previous wing designs. For this trade-off to work, the new flaps, which are the two highest sections of the wing, must be different in the middle of their span. More chord is present at the inboard end, and greater camber is present all the way to the outboard adjuster. Red Bull's work were not limited to the front wing, as the rear brake duct was modified to improve cooling while also improving how the local flow moves around that portion of the car. Red Bull, as is normal, does not focus solely on the exterior entrance to its brake duct. Instead, it has shifted the leading edge of the end fence to trap airflow between it and the tire's sidewall. As a result, a number of small gates are used to help regulate and align the airflow's path with the internal ducting. Red Bull's enhancements are clearly an optimization of what it already has in place, with CFD and wind tunnel studies critical in enhancing how these surfaces interact with the airflow. This had allowed Red Bull extend their lead even further. Can any of the other teams match Red Bull's performance this season? Or is Red Bull simply too far ahead right now? For the time being, it appears that the sky is the limit. However, if they are truly cheating, the squad should face severe consequences. Was George's assessment of Red Bull's performance correct? Is it true that they are withholding information, or is it a ploy to encourage the FIA to investigate Red Bull's finances? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. We're not sure what's right or incorrect. Red Bull appears to be on another level right now due to their continual supply of advancements. That's it for now. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to current on all F1 news, and we'll see you in the next video.